Greetings everyone. Today we're going to be discussing this specific comprehensive rider, which is a credit related to buyer's broker compensation. Now, you could use this comprehensive rider for when a seller agrees to give a credit to the buyer in a transaction when the buyer has entered into a separate buyer's brokerage agreement and elects to apply the credit towards the buyer's brokerage compensation. What does that mean? It means that the buyer in this particular transaction has an agreement with another broker and their realtor that they're going to be owed some compensation by representing the buyer. And this particular agreement is so that the seller can credit the buyer to pay their buyer's broker's compensation. More information about that will be discussed as I go through this particular document and fill it out. It's a one-page document. It's fairly simple. So we'll get into this. But first, as always, our company is Nizz Realty, Inc. We're licensed in the state of Florida at the time of making this video. We pay all of our agents 100% of their real estate commission. More information about our company can be found on our website, nizzrealty.com, or you could look at the description link at the bottom of this video for more details. But enough about our company. Let's discuss about this comprehensive rider and fill it out, because that's probably why you're here. So let's fill out some of the easy parts here. This is for a sales contract. You're going to be between a seller and a buyer. So let's just say the seller today is Billy Bob as a placeholder name. And then the buyer we're going to say is John Doe. Whoever the buyer and seller is, you put their names there. If they're companies, you put the company's names there if they own the property and the asset. The next line is the property described at, and you put the full property address here. So we're going to put a placeholder address here. And as always, I know it sounds ridiculous, but I say it in all of my videos, is you need to write the full property address. A lot of times I see realtors, they write the address and they like to just write it like this, where they just leave out the city and state and zip code. It's completely unacceptable. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I see it all the time. You need to put the full address, the city, state, zip code. If there's a unit number, you need to put the unit number there. You can write it with a number sign or write it like this. It really doesn't matter too much, but you need to specify the unit number if there is a unit number, and you need to put the city and state and zip code. Don't just write just the street that it's located. Don't leave out the numbers if it has numbers in front of it, like the house number or the building number. It's unacceptable. I'm going to move on from this, but I always like to emphasize on that because I see it all the time when people write the address, write the full property address. The next part, of course, is the initials from the buyers and sellers once you fill this out. The next part here is, let's read this paragraph. Buyer has entered into a separate brokerage agreement, as may be amended, a buyer's broker agreement, which is not incorporated herein by this reference, with insert name of brokerage, buyer's broker. So what this really means, just to simplify it, is if you're a realtor and you're representing the buyer, you put your company name here. This is for the buyer's broker, which is the buyer's realtor's company name. So let's say you're with our company, Nizz Realty, Inc., and you're representing the buyer. You're going to put your company name here, our company name. Simple enough. I know this paragraph may seem confusing, but all you do is you put your company name there if you're the buyer's broker. Whoever's the buyer's broker, you put the company name there. So in this case, Nizz Realty, Inc. for our company. But you put your company name there if you're with another brokerage and you're just watching this tutorial video. If you're representing the buyer, or if you're filling this out and you're representing the seller, you put the buyer's broker's name here, their company name. Not the agent's name. You don't put the agent's name here. You put the company name here, the broker's company, the brokerage. So let's move on from there. You could read through this paragraph if you want, but I'm just going to fill it out for you. This is the compensation amount, the amount that the seller is going to credit to the buyer, so the buyer can use that credit toward paying the whatever the compensation is in the buyer's brokerage agreement. So let's say you're the buying realtor and you represent the buyer. And let's say you did a buyer's brokerage agreement as you're required now with the new rules, and your compensation is, let's say, 2.5%. And the seller agrees that they're going to give 2.5% of the purchase price to the buyer to use to compensate their broker. So on paper, how this is working is the seller is giving 2.5% of the purchase price to the buyer as a credit, which the buyer will use to pay the buyer's realtor brokerage. So that's how this works. The seller is going to be paying the compensation by crediting the buyer. So whatever the amount is, you put it here. If it's just a percentage of the purchase price, you put it here. It could be a flat fee. If your buyer agreement says that your fee is, let's say, $3,000, you put $3,000 there if it's a flat fee amount. Let's say your brokerage charges a transaction fee on top of the percentage of the purchase price. So you could say 2.5% plus, let's say, a $400 transaction fee. You'd put that there. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to leave it at, let's say, our compensation that we agreed to work for as a buyer's realtor was 2.5% of the purchase price plus a $400 fee. And that's what you'd put here. Now, the next paragraph down here that you could fill out before the end of the document is, in the event the credit described above exceeds the amount allowed by buyer's lender for such contributions, then, to the extent permitted by buyer's lender, check 1. If no box is checked, the balance of the credit will be paid by seller directly to buyer's broker. So what this means is, you could check mark the balance of the credit will be paid by seller directly to buyer's broker, or the credit will be reduced to the maximum amount allowed by buyer's lender. This is if you're getting involved usually with FHA or VA loans. It could be other circumstances as well. Certain loans and financing will only allow a certain percentage to be credited, and you go through this paragraph to do that. And you could check mark the first box if the balance of the credit will be paid by seller. If you want the seller to pay, let's say the amount is only 2% that they're allowing, and then you're working for the 2.5%, the seller will cover the rest of the 0.5% there, since the financing doesn't allow the buyer to have any more than, let's say, a 2% amount. That's just a scenario I'm throwing out there. It can be a little bit confusing, but I wouldn't worry too much about this paragraph. If you have questions about it and you're a member of our brokerage, you could contact us, or if you're not, contact your broker to ask more about this paragraph. It's very seldom that it's filled out, but there are cases where the buyer's lender will only allow a maximum amount of a credit to be used and applied to them. And that's when this paragraph will come into play. I'm going to leave it blank for right now. If you have questions about that, contact your broker. If you're a member of our company, contact us, and we'll elaborate further on that. If you're running into a scenario, my recommendation before you start worrying too much about this paragraph is, if you're representing the buyer and they're financing, whether it's FHA, conventional, VA, whatever they're doing, if they're getting a loan and financing, I would have either the buyer or yourself and get authorization from your buyer to contact their lender or their underwriter and ask them if there is a maximum amount that is allowed to be applied as a credit to the buyer. And depending on how they answer that question, if there is a maximum, I would proceed accordingly with this paragraph. But to keep it simple for everyone watching this video, just if you're concerned about the amount, if there is a credit amount limit, have the buyer or get authorization to contact the buyer's lender or underwriter and ask if their loan allows up to what is the maximum for a credit. And then when you find out that information, you could proceed from there, and you could contact your broker to discuss further. But that would be the first step that I would take. And that's it for this agreement. It's fairly simple. It's a new comprehensive writer. It can be a little bit confusing with some of the language in here, but I try in my videos to just fill out the blanks and keep it simple. So hopefully this is helpful. We'll see you in the next video. Thank you.